Worlds is coming. 2 more days. Oh. It's going to be a good one. Hello and welcome to Vision and Isle. My name is Sam and Worlds is upcoming. Let's take a brief look at every single team, the patch, and all to come and expectations for this year. Quite honestly, I think this is going to be one of the closest years and one of the more nail-biting ones we've had yet. But it really comes down to who holds the snuff at the time, who has the right kind of momentum, and who's going to choke. So, if for those who are unfamiliar, my name is Sam. This is Worlds Watch, and I watch every single best of 5 playoff regional qualifier that every participating region does. So that was 81 best of 5s that I covered through. And if you've seen my previous videos of the summaries of each particular playoff, then you have a certain solid understanding of what some of my expectations may be. Maybe some surprises and some change of minds here and there, as well as important details and notes of context coming up. This particular video will be a crash course of all the teams that have qualified, how they stand up and rack up against each other, as well as patches and expected metas, at least from my perspective from watching every other region play. So, without further ado, some things to note. Each region played between 14-13 to 14-16, and Worlds patch is 14-18. Keep that in mind. With this particular patch, there's been trying to hit on the multi-lane ADCs as well as lane swaps in a way that will curb many of what was meta at the time, so some changes we'll have to do, whilst at the same time not doing enough to completely curb that. Some of the big names that you know, Smolder, Ezreal, so on and so forth, as well as Varus, I think will still have their place in this tournament, but you'll have a lot more auto-attack focus, late scaling options in the bot lane, as well as more variety that are not just solo lane marksmen. Patch 14-18, as well as patch 14-17, to be quite frank, do enough so that there's a lot more quality of life changes, but not so much that I feel will be super jarring. But we'll see. Priorities change, as well as time to have adapted on older metas means that we're going to get a lot more answers from the older metas that are going to be a lot more efficient with these nerfs that have been put in. Things like Azir, Ziggs, turret takers in general, things that had strong control over the macro, are hit super hard here. So, quite frankly, whilst I don't think that the flavor and approach to the game will be that different, even with the hits to lane swapping, which don't answer the actual purpose and needs of lane swapping, but will make it harder to really nail and solidify. Even with those hits, I don't think that the flavor of the meta will have changed a whole hell of a lot. But it's only a matter of seeing where that goes. With that said, moving on specifically to our expectations of the quality of the teams, let's jump in to the whole rigmarole. I'll put in a final caveat on this. I will put in the description the Google spreadsheet with all of the stats from the players and teams across summer, not the year long, just summer. So anything else, summer season to the end of when they played, that will be there as a comparison, as well as the breakdown of the players during those tournaments will also be there. It'll be in the description down below as an ability to read. I will also put in there all of the notes that I put for scripting for each particular team, also there down below, so you have a good sense of idea of not just having watched, but also read. In the link below, you'll also see the TikTok for when I do the breakdowns as I watch them live. I've spent some time off where I'll be able to create the videos as soon as each game, as soon as each series/game has been played during Worlds. So if you want to follow that and you don't want to wait for the videos to come out, that'll be there also. I've also put in my Pickems. Participate. My Pickems may change between now and then, but for the moment, I'm pretty locked in from what I have. So without further ado, let's go down and we're going to break down these teams in order of when they qualified. So let's get started. Gen.G is the first team to qualify for Worlds after winning MSI and cemented the LCK second seed after accumulating the most championship points. This is for sure one of the scariest teams going to Worlds. Some strong vision, neutral play, macro approach, coordination, ballooning leads, closing out games, so on and so forth. Heck, with nearly the highest win rate when ahead, you can tell that when this team has sinked its teeth in you, that they will go in for the kill, no time to waste. And for many of the expectations for this team is to make it to the finals. And while I expect the same, it will only come if Gen.G fix their largest issue that they had going into playoffs, and that's their hubris and lack of practice while playing from behind. They didn't have many teams who could solidly challenge them, and when it happened, it was clear that they floundered in an embarrassing way. So if that gets corrected, I have strong expectations for the squad. My player to watch is Pace, who is playing out of his mind this season. G2 is the second team to qualify for Worlds and cemented the LEC first seed from winning the season finals. One of the scarier teams going to Worlds, their coordination, late game play, neutral approach, macro choices, and all-around fundamentals are really solid. And while looking at the stats, you'd see this with the exception around their game duration, which is a notable red flag. And this is the case of, unfortunately, the early game woes, a team that is inconsistent in their approach to it and flounder frequently trying to get back when it happens. Now that said, while their early game is a sticking point, how they try to claw back is a little variable. On the one hand, they are always proactive, regularly using their known clutch factor to come back via teamfights, macro approach, or micro outplays. But teams that hold their snuff will know how to avoid letting G2 come back in any way, shape, or form. My expectation is that G2 at its best is a top 8 team, and at worst, a nightmare for lower seeded teams. And it's only a matter of which G2 we are going to get. My player to watch is Caps, who seems to be all work and no play this season. GAM Esports is the third team to qualify for Worlds and cemented the VCS first seed after winning the summer playoffs. Many of us are more than familiar with GAM, who have been a representative of the VCS for so long now. Strong coordination, proactivity, vision, neutral play. This is a version of the roster revitalized and roaring to go with many of their flaws corrected. Some concerns still arise from their overaggression and micro errors, mostly coming from an overabundance of confidence in their play and something easily exploitable. To note that as a squad, there haven't been as many challenges against teams with similar, if not stronger, strengths, and as such, much of their stats skew a little too nicely for them. As such, there is not a lot of expectations coming from GAM to make it far, but it would not surprise me to see this squad reach the Swiss stage and create a lot of upsets along the way. My player to watch is Levy, who is always a strong foundation for the team. Viking Esports is the fourth team to qualify for Worlds and cemented the VCS's second seed after getting second place in the summer playoffs. Now this name may be new for many, but were once known as the Saigon Buffaloes. This is a very familiar team to the international stage. Their strengths lie in very strong fundamentals, vision play, macro approaches, adaptability, and coordination. Most teams within the VCS struggled against the slow stranglehold they managed in most games. It would not surprise me to see them make the Swiss stage, but there is some hesitation. This team is solid against weaker, less coordinated teams, and holds a lot of their efficiencies to either solidify leads, close games, or even correct errors. But their passivity in waiting for their opponents to commit some of the errors as they play either standard or, dare I say, autopilot League of Legends has led them to a lot of tricky spots that need correction. If they want to make a consistent splash in the international stage, this has to be polished over. My player to watch is Ketsi for how disruptive he is during many skirmishes. Bilibili Gaming is the 5th team to qualify for Worlds and cemented the LPL first seed from winning the summer playoffs. One of the scariest teams to enter Worlds, their control around the early laning phase, neutrals, ballooning of leads, and especially coordination makes them an already formidable foe, but much of their strength specifically lies in their consistency around vision play, late game approach, and aggression. And especially with that aggression, very little time is given for any of their opponents to breathe or retake control. That said, it's that very same aggression that lands them in a lot of trouble when pushed or from behind. Micro errors and reckless plays to remain in the game are things that can be easily exploited. But a lot has to happen to get them at that stage to begin with, and it is more than expected from their kind of play to see them hit the finals, if not the top 4 at this tournament. My player to watch is On, who enables his teams in some of the best ways they can in his role. Saint-Germain Talons is the 6th team to qualify for Worlds and cemented the PCS's first seed after winning the summer playoffs. As far as expectations go, the Talons still show a strong approach to the fundamentals in coordination, proactivity, neutrals, closing out games, and so on and so forth. This team did not have much of a challenge in the region or during playoffs, and yet not many signs of an overinflated team stat-wise. Things like their win rate or like either general or while ahead, as well as game duration are inflated for sure. Little challenge came to them, and so closing out games is expected. Everything else, however, is well within the margins of expectations. Combine that with some very strange micro errors and overzealous plays, it wouldn't surprise me if they make Swiss stage but eventually struggle against some of our more consistent and well-coordinated teams, all while really punishing our more inconsistent ones. My player to watch is Betty, who kept outplaying everyone during this season. Fnatic is the 7th team to qualify for Worlds and cemented the LEC second seed from being the runner-up in the season finals. With some strong vision and decent late-game approach as well as coordination and ballooning of leads, this team has shown to push the limits of their opponents solidly. The larger concern comes at the behest of their early-game woes, which honestly are very inconsistent. At moments when they are ahead, it makes their late game shine even more. But from behind, we have a team that really struggles and barely finds ways to get back into the game. It doesn't help that their proactivity at that particular stage is also very abysmal, as there are no expectations for Fnatic to make the top 8 finish, but there are a very strong benchmark team for those who want to demonstrate that they have the minimum requirements to actually get to a top 8. My player to watch for this team is Humanoid for his relentless pursuit against his opponents. Mad Lions Koi is the 8th team to qualify for Worlds and cemented the LEC 3rd seed when landing in 3rd place in the season finals. As a squad, their playoff run was full of impressive feats and a lot of improvements across the board, from solid coordination, vision play, early game choices, and proactivity. Their adaptability showed to be inconsistent at best, with micro errors abundant, macro plays variable, and frankly, too many question marks that are surrounding this team that won once against G2 that proceeded to beat them on the rematch afterwards. They have some of the more concerning stats from the teams that have qualified, and while I put emphasis on improvement over longevity, this is something that should be in the back of everyone's minds when considering our expectations. Because we expect them to make it to the Swiss stage, but it wouldn't surprise me if there was an upset that happens and they failed to do so. My player to watch is Elyoya for how he approaches his laners in the early game. Team Liquid is the 9th team to qualify for Worlds and cemented the LCS second seed after getting 2nd in the championship. This team has found themselves at some of their strongest in a long time. Once leads are found, which is often, they balloon them efficiently, hold strong macro approaches, neutral setups, and coordination. Frankly, this team is likely to be a benchmark for the bottom half of the tournament, where if they even want to start contesting against the assumed top 8 teams, this is the team to beat. That said, the late game woes of this team have been ironed out but are not gone completely. They rear their heads against teams who are more proactive, stubborn, and with more coordination ability to play from behind. And when games are stretched out, the coordination from Team Liquid as well as macro play start to become inconsistent and they fall prey to tunnel visioning, which is what net them the 2nd seed instead of the 1st. My player to watch is Core.JJ, who is the enabler for his entire team. Movistar R7 is the 10th team to qualify for Worlds and cemented the LLA first seed after winning the closing playoffs. When looking at smaller regions, the representatives will have overinflated stats that need some adjustments. R7 is no such team, and that's primarily because of their inconsistencies. They hold some strong coordination with excellent ballooning leads and closing out of games during their highest of highs. Combine that with an excellent approach around neutral objectives and understanding of their win condition, there's a lot to look forward to with this squad. But most games, they fumble something and have to claw back in very awkward ways. As far as the LLA reps go, they are solid, and if enough polish has happened between their last series and the start of Worlds, we could see a solid set of upsets, but it will be hard to expect it against many more of the consistent and more coordinated teams at this tournament. My player to watch is Summit, whose performance tends to dictate the morale of the team. FlyQuest is the 11th team to qualify for Worlds and cemented the LCS first seed from winning the LCS championship. A team whose strengths come from late game coordination and closing out games have a fairly average set of stats across the board for this kind of playstyle. This mostly comes from the large amount of concerns from this squad. While there was some improvement, their early game woes from coordination, macro approach, micro arrows, neutral play, and much more are very inconsistent at best, and you will find this team either crawling back from behind to get a position that they know they can play well from, or either just having the play that they need from the start. And while this team plays very well from behind, going into Worlds with so many teams adept at early game play and at closing out leads from that play, the squad really needs to clean that up if they want to perform well at all. As it is now, it would be hard-pressed to even expect them to make it out of Swift stage into the top 8. My player to watch is Quad, who regularly tries to look for any opening for his team. Top Esports is the 12th team to qualify for Worlds and cemented the LPL second seed after accumulating the most championship points. Despite the qualification method, Top have only shown themselves as a World caliber team. Strong coordination, ballooning leads excellently, closes out games efficiently, with some solid micro and macro choices and neutral approaches. This is a textbook international contender, and if any team wants a shot at the top 8, this is most likely the team they will need to beat for sure or be left behind. To me, this team's falling short of top 4 would be a disappointment, but it's still a possibility. At moments, their late game play will look disjointed as they tend to spread themselves thin and make split calls for what to prioritize, especially during high-stakes games. On top of that, there is a matter of their more passive approach to the early game. We've seen them be proactive, but more often than not, they are content with handshaking the first 10 to 15 minutes, and that is of concern here. My player to watch is Xian, who manages to do a lot of setup for his team's success. Gen.G Esports is the 13th team to qualify for Worlds and cemented the LPL third seed after winning the round 1 regional qualifier. This team is a lot harder to pin down than others. They play incredibly well, coordinate with some strong emphasis on their win conditions and strong late game team fighting, but their proactivity, early game approaches, closers, and neutrals are a little all over the place and inconsistent. This team on paper shows a lot of promise, but in execution, it's more than a little concerning. Add that with the fact that they'll have to play with a substitute this Worlds, making their strongest assets a question mark. I have to wonder how well they'll perform. Now, in spite of that fact, many would still expect a top 8 finish, but I wouldn't be surprised if they nearly get there, but don't have enough to pass the hurdle. So my player to watch this time is Yagao, and how well he integrates with the squad going into this tournament. Fukuoka SoftBank House Gaming is the 14th team to qualify for Worlds and cemented the PCS's second seed after getting second place in the summer playoffs. Now, as far as the PCS rep go, this is par for the course. Incredibly well coordinated, solid early game and neutral setups, and aggression out the wazoo. Their proactivity is a little all over the place, but when said and done, weaker teams will struggle with how fast their tempo play is. Regarding any expectations, I don't think there is much really to get. They make a lot of macro and micro errors and have yet to show consistent approach to closing out games, which is what we would need to have confidence that they would for sure make it out of play-ins. But as it is, it would neither surprise me if they barely make it out or fall short to do so. This team will shock and surprise if you aren't careful, but they aren't that careful with their own play either. My player to watch is Dasher, whose skirmishing is incredible to watch. 100 Thieves is the 15th team to qualify for Worlds and cemented the LCS's third seed after landing third place during the LCS Championship. An early game focused team with some decent understanding of their win conditions and adaptations, their success was found in a string of improvements from the addition of Tomo into the roster. Although, I do have to note that their issues did not go away. Well, the expectations is for them to make it out of play-ins. Their inconsistent approach towards neutrals, wave management, turret control, late game play, and ballooning of leads leaves this team with a lot to improve upon before being convincing enough as a team that can face off against very hungry squads in the play-ins, let alone those waiting for them in the Swiss stage. My player to watch is Tomo for the very clear pressure and fresh play and look he gives for his squad. Weibo Gaming is the 16th team to qualify for Worlds and cemented the LPL 4th seed after winning the second round of the regional qualifiers. Now there's a lot of deserved hype as well as concern for Weibo's performance on the international stage. Against some of the best, their ability to play in the early game, balloon leads, set up neutrals, and play around macro approach, all while being incredibly coordinated, this is a team to watch out for. And while I and many others expect them to make top 8 or top 4, it's with a caveat. Weibo is consistently inconsistent. Their highest highs reflect our expectations, but on loss streaks, frequent micro errors, poor starts to games, we see a team who tends to spiral and tunnel vision in very concerning ways that is reflected in their stats. So the question as we enter the international stage is, how well will Weibo be able to find momentum to keep the highs as we know them for, and how fast will they come crashing down? My player to watch is Crisp for how much space he creates and enables for his team. Hanwha Life Esports is the 17th team to qualify for Worlds and cemented the LCK first seed after winning the summer playoffs. Some would see this team and think, how did they manage to pull off the surprise win of summer? Very simple. This is arguably one of, if not the strongest early game team going into Worlds. From turrets and wave management, macro plays, neutrals, coordination, all of it is something that Hanwha Life doesn't falter in. Now there are a lot of question marks around their strange trades, micro errors, and not to mention difficulties closing out their games, but as the series went on, we kept seeing clear improvements without giving away any of their early game strengths. And while I hesitate to firmly guarantee this team as finalists, I am almost assured that they will make top 8 if not top 4 with no issues around. My player to watch is Peanut, who fantastically enables his team's win conditions. Pain Gaming is the 18th team to qualify for Worlds and cemented the CBLOL's first seed from winning the Split 2 playoffs. Many should be familiar with the founding CBLOL squad representing them on the international stage once again, and this time packing a bit of a punch. Some strong coordination, early gameplay, neutral approach, and understanding of their win conditions. I can see this team going toe-to-toe with most of the teams heading into Worlds when they have a lead, but from behind is another story. They have a lot of issues playing from behind, and you combine that with some frequent bizarre micro errors and overzealous play, and most teams would know how to punish and turn around any leads that Pain could develop, or at least stop them from happening to begin with. I don't have strong expectations that they'll make it to the Swiss stage, but I do think they'll shake some things up during play-ins. My player to watch is Titan, who is a powerhouse for this particular squad. Dplus Kia is the 19th team to qualify for Worlds and cemented the LCK 3rd seed from winning the first round of the regional qualifiers. One of our slowest teams and more consistent teams with a solid approach to vision, coordination, and play at all stages of the game. Some larger concerns exist in how they approach this particular play. No longer are they cursed with early game strengths and late game woes, but instead are replaced with a very timid and hands-off approach to the game. They close out games solidly with leads, but these are not from things they manage to control, but instead handing the reins of the pace of the game to their opponents and waiting for the right moment to take control back. While many expect them to make the top 8 at this tournament by virtue of the league they are coming from, this won't be without a lot of struggles, and it wouldn't surprise me if they don't make it out of the Swiss stage. My player to watch is Aiming, who gains a lot of resources from his team and delivers. T1 is the last team to qualify for Worlds and cemented the LCK 4th seed after winning the round 2 of the regional qualifiers. Now we all know who this is, the defending world champions with an unchanged roster, which is rare these days that we see happening. So the question is, why did it take them this long to qualify? Because as a squad, they have some of the strongest macro approaches, incredible coordination, solid ballooning of leads, and close out games very nicely. This squad, at their very best, is terrifying. But that's the thing. At their best has not been the case for a while now. The level of inconsistency is rather concerning, and while many expect T1 to have their famous Worlds buff and make it to the top 8 at minimum, it would not surprise me if they don't make top 8 at all. And it's only a matter of if they get their heads out of their asses, approach a simpler style, and really play to their specific advantages. My player to watch will always be Faker, whose performance is a sink or swim for T1. And there we have it, a breakdown of every team coming in and the expectations we should have, or at least the expectations I expect to have. Looking at the stats, and usually when I do these breakdowns, as I have previously, there's very strong outliers every single time. Easily to correct overinflation of some stats with some of the lower expected teams, as well as like very strong outliers of our strongest teams. The only team that really did that this time is Gen.G and Bilibili, instead of like the host of very obvious top 8 teams. I put in a prediction, which I will be like linking again down below with all of my expectations with the stats, but those predictions came with like some very strong caveats very often. It, to me, from just stats wise as well as performance and expectations of improvements, it should be obvious that the finals will be Bilibili versus Gen.G, but it's very hard, especially when counting out who really lands in the top 8. Half of the tournament lands solidly in the top 8, more than half actually. And that's mostly because of some inconsistencies with many of the teams that are expected to go into the top 8, as well as a lot more strengths that teams are bringing forward. Couple that with a lot of these teams are old enough to have practiced lane swapping that I don't think has fully gone away, as well as just the individual skill and prowess is always there. I'm kind of just left with, this is going to be a close tournament. There's going to be a lot more upsets than expected, and if there aren't, it'll be very nail-biting. So, while to me, the favorites of the tournament are Bilibili, like very clearly the favorites overall, they're not by a long shot. Just because they're clear just means they're clear from like a lot of people trailing behind them very closely. But those are my thoughts. This is going to be the last tournament where we're going to see smaller regions like the LLA and CBLOL properly representing themselves. Even the LJL is getting their own representative here by proxy of the PCS's new system, which is going to be rehauled, as well as the VCS, just same thing. So I'm going to really hope that the play-ins is exciting and shows that we're going to be missing out on a lot of really good talent. But also that I hope that the quality overall of the tournament will reflect what I am seeing stats-wise, as well as all of the best of fives that we have seen so far. This is going to be a cool year, and I just can't wait for it to happen, which we won't have to wait for very long. There's only like 2.5-ish more days as the time I'm recording this. But with that, those are my thoughts and readings of everything. Like I said, you can go over the stats that I collected and analyzed from and make your own conclusions with it, based off of also your expectations of what you want to see or what you think we'll see. And I would love to hear in the comments down below your expectations. Which teams do you think are really clearly favored for the whole thing? Which matchup do you really want to see? I'm honestly really want to see how the LCS and LEC match up against each other, because both of these teams are looking a lot weaker than expected this year, just from play. But with that, I thank you all for watching. I will see you soon after the play-ins on this channel. If not, on TikTok right after every single game. And I appreciate everyone who watches. With that, I'll see you all next time.